Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Spartan, and this is Spartan News. I just wanted to. This one's been kind of on my mind for a while. It's kind of a fun one to do in a way, just because of the fact that I've seen some confusion out there, sometimes in the naming convention between two completely different brigades, and I thought it would be just kind of fun to do a little recap of two brigades. One used to be a Russian brigade, and one is a Ukrainian brigade, and they have similar names, and they are vastly different types of brigades with a vastly different type of history and success or lack thereof. Um, on the Russian side, I'm going to briefly talk about what once was the 72nd Separate Motor Rifle Brigade, which was formed in May of 2022. And on the Ukrainian side, it is the 72nd Mechanized Brigade. So Separate Motor Rifle Brigade is Russian, 72nd Mechanized Brigade is Ukrainian. And that particular brigade is just chock full of successes and heroes and history that goes back to many years ago, and has a storied history. And even when it was kind of wiped out or whatever, it was reconstituted and has been at the tip of the spear in the Ukrainian-Russian war. So to start off with, the Russian 72nd Separate Motor Rifle Brigade that's been in the news just recently. A little bit of a brief history. So first of all, jumping to the end, as a lot of you may know, this is Klishchivka, and this is where that particular brigade met its final resting place, shall we say. They've had the worst success. They've had the worst leadership, and I think part of it is because who they've been stuck fighting since April, or since May, which was the 3rd Brigade of the Ukrainian military, formerly known as the Azov Battalion, and they are just a bunch of tough, successful, skilled, talented, never say quit, never say die kind of guys. And it seems like wherever the 72nd Motor Rifle Brigade, the Russian one, went, the Azov 3rd Battalion was sure to follow. So a little bit of a history on the Motor Rifle Brigade. So the recruitment began with to constitute this particular brigade in August of 2022 to create in a drive to create a third Army Corps. Not really important. Like a governor announced the recruitment of the first 60 volunteers in the region. They came from Russian Tatars and some other Russian conscripts or volunteers, from Perm Krai. Don't know where that is. Not really too important, but basically, so you know, this particular brigade did not exist prior to August of last year. So one of the earliest references that you can find about this brigade is basically and this is a related article, and I'm not going to go too far into it, but basically, it's pretty bad when the first press sort of mention of your new brigade, or one of them, was that a soldier from the battalion that you're in suffered significant losses during the Kherson counteroffensive on the right bank of the Dnipro in 2022. So then they were moved over to the Donetsk Oblast. And again, I can't keep track of, like, they've had so many battalion tactical groups and brigades and everything basically sort of reconstituted, wiped out, formed again, or whatever. But long story short, is in February 2023, this particular 72nd Motor Rifle Brigade was moved to Vuhledar. And for those of you who've been following this relatively closely, you'll recall that Vuhledar was one of the biggest wipeouts of the Russian military in recent memory. I'll just read this here. After the Battle of Vuhledar, the brigade was committed to the Battle of Bakhmut, fighting positions in to the southern portion of the city. The brigade was later reported by Wagner groups supporting mill bloggers on May 15th to have retreated south of Ivanetsky during a Ukrainian counterattack towards Klishchivka. So that was on May 15th. So on May 15th, so these people, they were down, first of all, it kind of jumps around a bit. It doesn't really give you the best details, but basically they were in Vuhledar, and Vuhledar was basically a wipeout of a good chunk of the 72nd Brigade and the 155th Marine Brigade, or Battalion, I always forget which one that was, and they were an elite troop, supposedly. And they had something like 130 plus pieces of mechanized material, BTRs, BMPs, tanks, etc., all get absolutely decimated. So then they took what was left of the 72nd Motor Rifle Brigade, they reconstituted it, they moved it up to Bakhmut, and they told it, they assigned it to watch Wagner's flank around southern Bakhmut. On May 21st, the Ukrainian 3rd Assault Brigade reported that the 72nd Brigade was unsuccessfully counterattacking the region to regain its lost positions. So basically what happened was they were attacked on the southern side of Bakhmut, they tucked tail, they ran to the wherever. They were sort of stopped, reconstituted, whatever. I think their commander was replaced at some point, and they were basically told to turn around and retake those positions. While that happened, that is one of the famous speeches where Prigozhin came out and basically said that the Russians were abandoning their flanks, and that Wagner had to cover their own flanks now and take those positions as well, etc. And well, that was the 72nd Motor Rifle Brigade. So they went from a wipeout in Vuhledar to basically a retreat at the first sign of trouble in southern Bakhmut. Then they were told to retake that ground that they'd lost against the Azovs, the fiercest fighters that the Ukrainians have. The fallout from the retreat of the brigade near Bakhmut resulted in Wagner Group leader, there it is, Evgeny Prigozhin, publicly blaming the brigade for abandoning the neighboring Wagner troops. In support of this effort, on June 4th, Prigozhin published a video of the interrogation of the brigade's commander. You guys remember that commander, where basically they captured him after he attacked them? So that this commander basically waited in the woods for the Wagner troops to come by and started shooting at them, and he captured this commander and basically put him on camera and made him admit all the things that he did wrong. That is also famously the 72nd Separate Motor Rifle Brigade. This is how horrible things have gone historically over the last year for this particular brigade. Jump to the 2023 counteroffensive. During the Ukrainian counteroffensive, this brigade, same one, was tasked with the defense of the southern flank of Bakhmut, namely the villages of Andriivka and Klishchivka. Do those ring a bell? Are those famous villages right now? Yes, they are. Why? Because they just fell to the Ukrainians over the last 36 hours, or 72 hours or so. A little bit longer, actually, but, OPSEC, you got to wait. On September 16th, 2023, David Axwell, it doesn't matter, Forbes magazine, many people reported the same thing, reported that the 72nd Motor Rifle Brigade had ceased to exist, reiterating points made by the 3rd Assault Brigade, Azov Battalion, which reported that they had surrounded the village of Andriivka, trapping the 72nd inside. Here's Andriivka. So they were trapped inside. The Ukrainians came in a pincer move on both sides, and these guys in here either refused to move or couldn't move, or heard about the fact that they needed to retreat. But when I say move, I mean retreat. And by the time they heard about it, it was too late, and they were completely cut off. The 3rd Assault Brigade reported that the unit had been destroyed during the liberation of the village, with 3 battalion commanders and the reconnaissance chief, basically intelligence chief, being liquidated alongside most of their infantry. Geolocated footage shows that some of the brigade's personnel attempted to surrender. So you guys may have seen that video too. I didn't play it, others did, but there was a video of Ukrainians taking control of some Russian troops, telling them to lay on their stomach, etc. And then artillery shells started coming in. That was the retreating Russian formations calling in artillery fire on their old positions to take out their own men because they knew their men were surrendering. Shows that the brigade's personnel attempted to surrender the Ukrainian units just to be shelled by artillery from Russian barrier troops. Barrier troops means they're a barrier to you surrender or to you retreating or stop. They're not there to fight. They're there to stop you from stopping fighting, if that makes sense. Killing both Ukrainian and Russian soldiers. That's not actually true. I've seen numerous clips of that particular strike, and it's hard to see. Maybe one Russian soldier was KIA. I believe all the Ukrainians survived, a couple with minor injuries, and I think the rest of the Russians did as well. It was incredible considering an artillery shell landed. It looked like right on one soldier, and that explosion was in the midst of several others from both sides, and it looks like the vast majority of them lived, if not with just injuries. Axe also reported that the loss of the 72nd would further stretch the area of responsibility that the 76th Guards Assault Division had to defend, as Russia does not have a standby reserve brigade to fill in the gap. One of my earlier videos, I said that basically Russia's defense is like an eggshell. The ground that they're defending all over the place, it's rigid in a lot of places. It's very hard to get through, but there's a soft center behind most of the areas that they're defending. If you can break them deep enough, wide enough, they do not have a standby reserve force to come in and fill in the gaps. They don't have a QRF. They don't have a reserve force. They don't have anything. So all you've got to basically do is wipe out any of the troops on the sort of the back trenches, the back lines, those that are just rotating, whatever, as well as the frontline troops, and you'll take the whole thing. So, and just kind of recapping again, here's another article basically covering off some of the high points of what I just talked about, which is the newly created 72nd Motor Rifle Brigade with the Russian Army completely wiped out in eastern Ukraine. So there's some of the prisoners that were taken from that brigade. The one thing that I wanted to kind of highlight too, that's really kind of cool in a way, is the class of the Ukrainian troops. So even though the Ukrainian troops, the Ukrainian 3rd Assault Brigade had basically won the day, they'd surrounded the town, they had a bunch of troops inside. Because those troops hadn't yet surrendered, the Ukrainians very well could have just called in cluster munitions and artillery shells and that sort of thing, and basically leveled everybody that was in there and called it a day. Instead, what did they do? They set up some loudspeakers, and they basically started calling to the Russians and asking them, basically telling them that they can surrender and they won't be harmed. I don't have a translation for this, but I did want you to hear it. And if anybody can translate Cyrillic, then there you go.
Господа российские военнослужащие, к вам обращается командир 2-го штурмового батальона 3-й отдельной штурмовой бригады Вооруженных сил Украины. Мой позывной «Слик». Уже сутки, как наши парни заняли село Андреевка. Весь ваш личный состав либо бежал с поля боя, либо был уничтожен. Также были убиты 2 ваших командира батальона, а именно Медведь и Шайтан. Мы знаем, что группа авангарда.
Anyways, I just want to play that to kind of show you what the two differences were like as far as the class of the troops, how you take prisoners. There's what it looks like basically. It's a two road town, 4 intersections basically, and it's rubble. It was wiped out. it's heartbreaking, to be honest with you. There wasn't even a place to raise to have the flag raising ceremony because there's basically nothing left. So you just have to have Ukrainians standing there holding their units and battalion and Ukrainian flags to basically say they've liberated it. I find it really interesting too is that it seems like the third assault the third brigade, second assault battalion. I always screw that up. That's the Azov. Third brigade, second assault battalion. It seems like they went and they found these guys in Vuhledar, and then they followed them up to south of Bakhmut, and they smacked them once, and then they smacked them a second time, and then these guys moved into Andriivka and Klishivka, and these guys and they followed them there, or stuck with them there, and eventually wiped them out. So it was almost like wherever you go, I go, and I'm going to keep on beating you until you give up or disappear, and they disappeared. So that is the start, middle, and happily sad end of the 72nd Motor Rifle Brigade. On the flip side, this is from United 24, and this is about the 72nd Mechanized Brigade of Ukraine, which has a storied history from defending on the initial days of the February 24th attack. And there's some really great video footage and some interesting facts in here that you might not have heard before. So here you go.
How did these soldiers manage to destroy a record number of enemy vehicles in a single battle? Why does President Zelensky wear their chevron? And how did they prevent the capture of Kyiv? This is the story of the 72nd Separate Mechanized Brigade, named after the Black Zaporizhians. In February 2023, the town of Vuhledar in eastern Ukraine became the backdrop for the largest tank battle of the ongoing war.
And just to continue with the Battle of Vuhledar, it was over several days, if not many days, several days. And I don't think he talks about it here. One of the things that the Ukrainians did was they basically, if you see these fields out here and off to the other side, they had those completely mined, right? So that there was only one road in or out. And they didn't mine that road initially. And they allowed the Russians to continue to attack with BMPs and tanks and BTRs, etc. And they would take these tanks, start to take them out with ATACMs and, very, very accurate artillery fire, maybe some ATGMs too, things like that. But then what they started to do is they started to fire anti-tank mines in behind these troops, so that the road that they had just come down that they thought was safe and not mined at all was now all of a sudden mined behind them. So those that got away from the artillery and the ATGMs, etc., manpads, whatever, they turned around and started to retreat and started to hit mines on those roads as well that they thought was a safe path out.
The Russian forces unleashed a formidable tank assault. However, the Ukrainian soldiers were prepared for the onslaught. They mined fields, aimed their artillery at the single road, and deployed fighters equipped with ATGMs in the surrounding forests. The New York Times reported astonishing statistics, revealing that Russia lost at least 130 tanks and armored personnel carriers in the 3-week battle. This gave Putin a
And it's not like the Ukrainians changed tactics. Like, they just did the same thing over and over again, and the Russians did the same thing over and over again. The 72nd and the 155th just kept sending guys down the road, the same road. And we heard complaints about some of their soldiers, like, why are we doing this? It's a death trap. And they kept going down the same road, 130 tanks and IFVs.
reason to say gleefully, the Marines are working at their best, fighting heroically. In response, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense trolled the invader with video evidence to the contrary, stating, "So true. This is just one of the many victories accomplished by the 72nd Brigade."
The plans were foiled right from the start, and the rapid landing attempt failed. It faced a delay of half a day, allowing the armed forces of Ukraine to arrive and use artillery to make any landing impossible, even in theory.
So that's Hostomel Airport. So Hostomel Airport was basically, if you guys know Operator Starsky, he was just one of the best guys out there. Content creators, soldier, press officer, etc. Supporter of Ukraine, interviews with everybody. That he has patience for everybody. And he's funny as hell. But anyways, his unit and other units, the 72nd, etc., they were all around Hostomel Airport. I think some of them were doing exercises or whatever. Some of them were reservists, and some of them were Reg Force, whatever. And they ended up having the 50 plus helicopters of Russian VDV Spetsnaz Special Forces trying to land at Hostomel Airport and take over the airport. And Operator Starsky at one point, I don't think it comes up in this video, but at one point he said they just kept mowing down the Russians, and like these are like reservists and definitely not special forces, wiping out Russian special forces. And he says the only reason they stopped firing is because they ran out of ammunition. Other than that, they would have still been firing.
Our defenders successfully damaged the runway, rendering it unsuitable for landing enemy's heavy transport aircraft, thus preventing any landings from taking place. But what if they had succeeded in landing?
I'm sorry, but Kyiv would have been captured.
The 72nd Brigade, stationed just outside Kyiv, played a pivotal role in this. Its fighters countered the enemy in the most significant moments of the Battle of Kyiv. Together with artillery units from other formations, they...
Yeah, so I think Starsky's unit and other units were inside the airport, and then the 72nd was on the outside of the airport, and Starsky's guys held on for as long as they could until the ammo ran out, and then they eventually started to retreat, and then the 72nd came in, separate mechanized brigade came in with artillery support and cleaned up the rest.
They successfully destroyed the runway in Hostomel, thwarting the enemy's attempted landing. Additionally, they defended the crucial village of Moshchun, situated on the way to the Ukrainian capital.
They had already prepared for crossing, but they could not go further, as they were uncertain how many people would be left behind. There were thousands of Russians here. But in Moshchun, 100 people come here and 50 are taken out. 50 retreat.
The Russian forces found themselves trapped here for nearly a month and eventually had to retreat, not only from Moshchun but also from the entire northern part of Ukraine. In their defense efforts, the Ukrainians utilized the remnants of old fortifications from World War II. Alexander Vdovichenko's grandfather had fought in these back then. Now it is his grandson who has to defend Kyiv.
Imagine fighting in the same pillbox in the same field that your grandfather fought in. That's just, it's beyond, I don't have words for that one.
Yet again.
There were definitely both Ukrainians and Russians in this bunker, united against fascism and Nazism. And now we find ourselves at war with our, as they used to say, older brother. They are not older, they are simply sordid. A horde. Evil.
The 72nd Brigade has been actively engaged in combat since 2014, when Russia started a hybrid war against Ukraine. They distinguished themselves as among the first cyborgs, the renowned defenders of Donetsk airport, and played a significant role in the liberation of Mariupol. After 2014, the brigade held positions in the most intense areas of the hybrid war, specifically near Volnovakha and Avdiivka. During their rotations, they were consistently hailed as heroes. In fact, the 72nd Brigade's history predates the events of 2014. The brigade's name, the Black Zaporizhians, dates back to the cavalry forces of the Ukrainian People's Republic, a state that existed in the early 20th century, but succumbed to the previous Russian invasion. A century ago, the Black Zaporizhians fought against invaders on the very same fields where present-day battles unfold, near Kyiv, Kharkiv, Mariupol, and Crimea. The modern Black Zaporizhians proudly continue the legacy of their predecessors. Their chevron, inscribed with Ukraine or death, is also worn by President Zelensky, who received it from the 72nd Brigade in 2019. The brigade is famous for its skill in using drones. Using civilian drones and small ammunition, they destroyed entire grad systems or demonstrated impeccable precision.
That's the whole
The brigade also utilizes unique German DM-22 mines, which they strategically.
So these German DM-22 mines, they're some of the coolest and most devastating mines out there. They can be operated by, like a manual intervention. So basically somebody can be on a trigger and be watching when to set it off. There can be a proximity where something gets close to it, vibrates it, and or runs over basically like a kind of a fiber optic, whatever. So there's many different ways of setting these off, but they're absolutely devastating. They have a shaped charge. They do not miss, and they can take out anything on wheels or tracks.
Place along roads to target passing vehicles. These mines, armed with tandem charges, were responsible for the destruction of a significant number of Russian tanks in the Battle of Vuhledar. One of the most notable battles of the 72nd Brigades was an ambush on Russia's 90th Tank Division in March 2022 near Kyiv. Intercepted communications revealed.
Can anybody just think about the fact they don't have air superiority. They don't even have air dominance. They don't have any air assets above these tanks. And these guys just think that they're rolling into like Afghanistan or Georgia or whatever. And Georgia didn't go well for them either. And Afghanistan definitely didn't. But they just come rolling down the highway with no air cover. Bayraktars overhead, drones overhead. Ukrainians know they're coming. And then they turn this into a freaking shopping mall parking lot of armor. And they wonder why they all had to turn around and hightail it out of there.
That the invaders lost nearly an entire regiment and its commander, Colonel Andrei Zakharov, was killed. In the autumn of 2022, they fought near Pavlivka in eastern Ukraine. The village came under attack by approximately 600 enemy Marines from the 155th Brigade, supported by 30 armored vehicles.
That's the 155th Marine Brigade. That's the air quote special forces, kind of one down from the VDV.
The severity of the situation in Pavlivka was acknowledged even by the UK Ministry of Defense. However, the Russian elite troops soon released an open letter revealing that within a few days, around 300 of their soldiers had been killed, wounded, or captured,
50%.
And half of their armored vehicles had been destroyed. Around the same time,
after 3 days, 50% of their unit was gone.
Rustam Muradov, the officer in charge of these Russian attacks, was promoted to the rank of Colonel General. The 72nd Brigade remains steadfast in its fight against the enemy. The goal is to liberate the entire Ukraine.
I can only say one thing to our so-called friends from the other side. Do you want this land? We will mix you with it.
There you go. Anyways, I just thought it'd be fun to kind of recap the tale of two 72nd Brigades, and now there's only one, the 72nd Separate Mechanized Brigade of Ukraine is the last one standing. The other one is gone, and we won't be hearing from it anymore. So there you go. Hope you like this. Please share, subscribe, give me a comment, ask for different content. Happy to provide. Love you all. Slava Ukraine.